Okay, welcome everybody. Since I am the session chair and the presenter of this paper, we're going to give myself an extra 20 minutes. Does anybody want to be like a session chair while I'm doing this?
I think there's a timing if you want.
I just set my timer.
Okay.
But feel free to like start waving at me or something like that. I don't have as many slides as Sylvia.
How many?
If we're lucky, I will go under time, actually. That would be nice. This isn't really my paper. I'm presenting on behalf of a group of people that were working together on some visualization literacy topics. So really, the people that really did the work are everybody else except for me, basically. So the title of the talk is called Evaluating the Impact of a Constructivist Approach to Treemap Literacy. Say that 10 times fast. So I think everybody here is very familiar with tree maps. And so the spirit behind this research is to evaluate the cognitive process that takes place when somebody is looking and observing and trying to understand a tree map. And so there's an interpretation process, and we're trying to figure out what might inhibit that process, like what are the barriers to tree map literacy, and how could they be overcome, like discovering the barriers and then trying to resolve the barriers. That's the spirit behind this work. And so we try to incorporate the notion of constructivism and apply it to tree map literacy. So what is constructivism? An educational theory based on the concept that learners actively construct their own knowledge, building on their prior knowledge and experiences as a foundation. And that is as opposed to passive learning, so just being fed information. You're engaging with the information and actually using your own brain actively in the learning process. And so the idea is we go from passive learning to active learning. That's part of the idea. And it builds on the existing knowledge in the user's pre-existing knowledge. So we tried to come up with a constructivism approach to tree map literacy. So basically incorporating constructivism into the tree map literacy process and then evaluate that process in the classroom. That was the idea. So we developed and evaluated a constructivist tool to teach students a data visualization course about tree maps. So that's the summary. There has been some previous work in this area. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this paper. I hope if I could pronounce this. Kachorn and Klaus Müller demonstrated a learning by analogy method to introduce new visualization techniques by animating between the familiar and unfamiliar techniques. So in their approach and our approach, we take something that's familiar that we assume the students or the learners already know, and then we build on top of that. We transform the existing knowledge, hopefully into new knowledge. That's the approach. We have done some previous work on tree map literacy. So we built a tool previously that connects the traditional hierarchical tree with a tree map, and the user can interact with both the tree map and the traditional hierarchical tree and see the correspondence between them. We used that in a classroom. We did a classroom-based evaluation of that tool. We also looked at this topic. We did a previous paper on this topic using constructivism, but we didn't have both conditions tested in the classroom. And I will describe those two conditions. So we We perform a classroom-based experiment with two conditions. One half of the class sees only tree maps, and the other half of the class sees a node link diagram connected to a tree map in a coordinated multiple views approach. So this is the software, and it's a coordinated multiple views software. So the user, we make an assumption in this particular experiment that the learners already understand what a node link diagram is. They already understand that. We assume they have that knowledge in their heads already, and then they use that knowledge to apply it to tree maps. So we have these two views of the same data. I'm going to try to demonstrate it actually. I don't know if it's going to work. Let's see if it works. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Shocking. So there's the traditional the node link tree diagram or hierarchical node link diagram. There's the corresponding tree map, and they're linked and connected, right? So we can click on a node in the node link diagram, and then the tree map updates. And we can keep going. And then we reach the bottom of the hierarchy. You can see the correspondence between the leaf nodes in the node link diagram and the leaf nodes in the tree map. We can go back up, I think. So, yeah, it actually seems to work, surprisingly. That's the idea. Does everybody see that? That's the software we're testing. And in one condition, so we split the classroom up into two halves. We evaluate this in the classroom. One half of the class sees both of these views, the linked views, and they're asked to perform a series of tasks. And the other half only sees the tree map view. And that's it. Those are the two testing conditions. So the software allows the students to interactively explore the hierarchy using the node link diagram and the tree map. And that's our implementation of the constructivist approach to tree map literacy. That's the actual implementation. So we had a classroom-based experiment with 69 students, all undergrads, 4 graduate students. 66 were in the 18 to 24 age group, 3 students were in the 25 to 44 age group, 24 females and 45 males. And 2 students were excluded from the study due to their lack of attention to the questions. I won't make any jokes about TikTok being a distractor. And we had 34 students in the NLT group. I hope I can keep this straight in my head for the rest of the presentation. That's the node link tree diagram group. The combination of the two. And then 33 students in the T group, which is the group that drinks tea. It's the group that only sees the tree map, nothing else. Feel free to interrupt, by the way, in case anybody has questions or comments. This is the diagram of the procedure. So everybody takes a demographics and colorblind test. Then we give them a modified mini VLAT. And that we assess their existing literacy before they take the test. And then we split them up into 2 groups, the interaction with node link and tree maps. And then we have an interaction with the tree maps only software. And then we give them another tree map literacy test. So we have a pre-test, an intervention, and then a post-test. And then we make a comparison. And the results are, anybody want to predict what the results are? These results are kind of surprising. We got results that we weren't expecting. I just kind of gave it away.
The Treemap one did better than the node division.
That is correct, yeah, you spoiled it.
I have a hypothesis around it too.
We'll discuss it more. So here are some of the results. So for the pre-tests, students had approximately the same level of familiarity with the charts. So they both performed similarly on the mini VLAT test. So the median for the NLT group is the 14 out of 16, and the median for the T group is 13 out of 16. Both groups got similar scores on the exploratory tasks that they were given. So the students completed 16 exploratory tasks with their assigned interfaces and answered the questions, and they performed very similarly. And the median score for students in both the groups was the same. The students in the Treemap's only group had a narrower distribution of scores than the students in the Constructivist group. You can imagine how exciting this was when we were looking at the results. This is what the questions and answers look like in detail, if anybody's interested. So that there's all of the questions on the y-axis, and then the number of correct scores, or the percentage of correct scores on the x-axis, and then they're color-coded. So for question 1, the Treemap group got all of that group got the first question, 94% got the question correct in the NLT group, and so on. They're quite similar, the performances. They kind of, it's hard to see any big differences. We only found one kind of interesting difference in one of the questions. And we hypothesized that this might have had something to do with the labels, but we're not sure. Students in both groups self-reported a significant increase in understanding of tree maps after the intervention. And both students reported positively, both students in both groups reported positively in their confidence that they think they learned something from the experiment. This is some feedback from the actual post-intervention interview and survey. So this is some verbal feedback. Seeing the tree structure that creates the tree map helped me understand the tree maps better, and so on. So kind of typical comments. I think the software allows me to expand or collapse the nodes and get a better understanding of tree maps through the node name representation. And so this is the part that kind of surprised us, that Alvita already pointed out anew. Students in the Treemap's only group performed slightly better than the ones that were in the so-called Constructivist group. So if you showed the students only the Treemap and they interacted only with that, they actually performed slightly better on the literacy test, the post-intervention literacy test, which is not what we were expecting. We were expecting that the Constructivist approach would help them perform better. So students, the hypothesis is that the students in the NLT group relied more on the familiar node-link diagrams when answering the questions in the exploratory tasks, whereas the students in the Treemap only group had no choice but to use the interactive Treemap to answer the questions and go along the way. And we were discussing this. We don't have a definitive answer, but we think that maybe the node link diagram is a kind of distraction. So it takes your attention and maybe divides it. And maybe this is actually not helping in this particular scenario, dividing your attention between the two diagrams. Okay, so that's a little summary. So we conducted an evaluation of a constructivist approach to Treemap literacy. And the students in the constructivist group received slightly lower scores than the ones in the NLT group. So we think that the node-link diagram may have acted as a distractor in this case, as opposed to something that helped the literacy. Okay, I only took 15 minutes, so as a little reward for you guys, I'm going to advertise 60 seconds. So next year's Eurovis will be in Nottingham. We're looking for delegates. We're looking for anybody that would like to get involved with the organization, and we're looking for sponsors. So if you see me at some point and you have anything you want to say about those three facets, feel free to come and talk to me. Any questions about the talk or Eurovis 2026? Questions? I guess, Alvita, can you tell us why the NLT group?
Wait, I think somebody asking the question.
Okay.
But sure, I have a
hypothesis. Do you have a theory? Yes.
I do have a theory.
Yes.
So I don't remember what year the paper was published, but Robert Kosara and Caroline Zemkovich, they had a paper, it's more than 10 years old, where they showed that when you show someone like a noded diagram, they have a mental, they adopt a different mental model of structuring the data than with something like a Treemap that had more of a containment metaphor. So with the noding diagram, the way people mentally represent the data was like a onder. It was like they would describe something as something being under something, whereas with the Treemap, they would describe the data as something being within. And so they just show that you develop a completely different mental model for the data. And so showing someone a node-link diagram and ask them to understand that data, develop a mental model of that, to translate that into a Treemap would be extremely different from the time. And so when you showed that, I completely expected it to be like a very difficult problem for the people who should be so old. So I'm curious though, you had hypotheses that they would do better based on this constructivism approach. I'm curious about your decision to adapt that idea of constructivism. What was like the reasoning behind that, and the reasoning behind your initial hypotheses?
Well, I'm going to say it wasn't my idea. It was Alak's idea. So I don't know. I know that Alak likes to just explore different educational theories and apply them in visualization literacy settings. So whenever he hears about a new learning theory, he will just see, okay, can we evaluate this in a visualization literacy theory setting? So I think he just heard about constructivism and thought, okay, let's give it a try. But I don't know definitively because it wasn't yeah. But I think you're right. I think while you were explaining that, I think you're absolutely right, because the node-link diagram is juxtaposition, right? You're using juxtaposition to compare things. And the Treemap is using superposition. And you're asking somebody to resolve the difference between juxtaposition and superposition. And that's going to take extra processing. It's more demanding to ask somebody to resolve those two things than looking at superposition only. So I think that's that. If I had to guess, that is what's going on. Yeah. There were some other questions. Name and affiliation, please.
Yeah, Thomas Miro, working in the University of Münster, the physics group. I think so. I'm very surprised also by what you showed us. And for me, I would now like to see if you or the people from your group have thought about this in a bigger context, because what we see quite often in visualization is that we try to combine different visualizations with each other. And you have now showed us, okay, the context of learning something or a new type of visualization, and the context of like node-link diagram and Treemaps. But you can see like the combination of two different visualizations quite often in our field. Do you think that this also adapts to other contexts in this case, or do you think it's only about learning a new method to visualize something?
Does it adapt to other contexts? Well, I mean, we have this big set of literature on multiple coordinated views already. So if you ask the multiple coordinated views authors, they would say yes, it adapts to other contexts. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of literature on this.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a multiple coordinated views implementation.
Yeah, but do you think that in general from multiple coordinated view visualizations this is like a problem, or
Oh, okay. Does the same problem apply to the rest of the multiple coordinated views? That's a good question. That's a very good question, actually. And if I had to guess, my knee-jerk reaction would be yes. I mean, it's logical to hypothesize that a multiple coordinated views is going to require more cognition on behalf of the user. It's pretty logical because they're seeing more angles. So yeah, that would be an interesting thing to evaluate, actually. Yeah. I think I saw someone else with us.
Applied Sciences. So thanks for the presentation, and we share the experience that measuring things is very difficult. I wanted to point to a different perspective about the data you used. And so you made the experience that makes a huge difference if you saw it in that respect. And on the other hand, it also kind of applies to constructivism, right? So if I'm more familiar with the topic of the data, that might also.
Yes, I agree with that. So this was quite a limited implementation, and I think we only had 2 data sets to choose from, something like that. So yes, I think the data set that you choose could impact the results. I think that that's true. Yeah. But we didn't evaluate that. Need an affiliation?
Yeah, production for the both day week. I really like this talk. However, I do have a question regarding design trends. So, like, I'm very no-link diagram with the Treemap, like you pointed out, is a little bit weird because they implicitly convey a different sense of relationship. I was wondering about no-link diagram specifically, and also considered like isolated forms or something that shows more of a contained type of thing, like a hierarchical structure.
Instead of the node link?
Yeah. Or like a vertical, like top-down diagram that more conveys a sense of hierarchy.
The reason we chose the node link representation is just because we assumed that everybody would be familiar with that already. So if we chose something like icicle plots, I think the assumption that everybody is familiar with icicle plots already might not be so a bit risky, let's say. Yeah. So that was kind of the reasoning behind that. But even that is an assumption. So you could ask a question like, are you sure everybody is familiar with node-link diagrams? And we would have to look into the pre-test conditions to get more information.
When you do that, or like option full VI, it doesn't really define anything that specific, right? I'm assuming that's what you modify it from?
Yes. Let me see. We have 30 seconds left. Is it a quick question?
Potentially.
Okay.
Did you see a negative correlation between the mini-relay scores and the performance for the E+T?
I don't think we looked into that. We'd have to look into that in more detail.
It kind of feel like the people who have like more familiarity with visualization would have tried harder to link the two and then performed worse at the end. I'm curious about if you saw that.
We did some more analysis than what's shown here. So we did leave out some things for space and time, but I don't remember all the details. Yeah. Okay, let's wrap up, even though we could go on for longer. Thank you, everybody.